legal purposes, but hopefully someone.
Has there always okay, Beard, you'll know better than me. Sorry before we get started. Has there always been that in the back of that song?
That little like backbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Didn't you make that song?
I did make that song.
Okay, just checking.
I don't know what stuff is.
Your genius knows no bounds, and
no, let's not do that.
Yeah, see, you just like you make a banger and you just move on to the next banger. You don't dwell on it.
I don't see. This is the thing. This is why I'm dangerous. I have no idea what I'm doing. So, all right, let's go around before we get started. No one likes it. Let's go around, introduce thyselves. We have two very special boys with us today. Two of the specialist boys.
We're the most special.
So go tell people who you be with.
Oh, this is a Ben show. So Duke.
Oh, okay.
I'll defer to you.
Hi.
Yeah, James hates it, but it's what it is.
I am a longtime friend. Ben and I have been friends since we were kids. And I am a lifelong DM and GM. I run, currently I play in a show on TTRP Theater, but I have been GMing over there for 5 years. And I am excited that I finally got to mesh up with the schedule of prep school today.
That's what happens. He's a West Coast kid now, so he's living that good life in the sunny California.
Yeah,
instead of the soon-to-be frozen north that James and I have chosen to do our time in.
Oh, it's getting down into the high 30s and low 40s at night, so everybody dresses like they're going to the mountain. It's weird, man. Like full gloves, hats, like puffy coats. It's funny. It's so different,
I mean, even like growing up in Kansas, where occasionally we would get like a couple inches of snow, and people would treat it like it's an apocalypse.
Right.
I always jokingly say that when I moved to Wisconsin, Minnesota, I saw more snow on the drive to live there than I had literally seen my entire life put all together.
Yeah, like I remember one winter when we were kids. I think we were like 10 or 11, and we got a crazy amount of snow that one winter. Like we built forts in the yard, and I mean it was, but
I think we got like a foot. And people were like, "Oh God, it's the end of all things."
Right.
Someone save us.
Whereas, now you'll get that in a night.
Yeah. As someone as two people who have to shovel it, we feel each other's pain. Beard, you're back, baby.
I'm back, and I'm better than ever. Yeah, I'm Beard. I did not grow up with King. I was born in Minnesota.
You have grown old with King.
Died in Minnesota. But I'm here living in Minnesota right now. And I've not, compared to these two, I have not DM'd for quite as long, but I dragged Ben kicking and screaming into raising funds by doing that. And so I like to think that I've carved out my stupid little niche. But I didn't start playing D&D until 10 years ago. So the first time I ever played was in the year of our Lord Bahamut 2014. So
was 5th edition your first edition?
I played a little bit of 4th with Ben before we made the big switch, but like 4, maybe 3 sessions, I think, in 4th edition. And I jumped in like you guys were like at 13th level or something, so he helped me like build this bodacious bard named Jiminy Christmas.
So that was the thing. I had been running for 2 groups. I had 4 groups going at the time, and I can't remember how that all like went down. I can't remember if I asked you or if you were like, "What is this thing you nerds?"
You'd been asking for a while, and I finally was like, Yeah, okay, I'll try it.
Yeah, I think it was like I browbeat you into submission, where it was just kind of like, come on, James. No, please, come on, be a pal, James. Come on, play.
You're like, I really need someone for this group, and the group was like 7 people. I really need someone for this group.
That
opening this group.
That was in my
opening in this group.
Yeah, those were my mistake days. Those are the days of error where I was like, I could run D&D for like 15, 20 people. That's a good idea.
That's easy.
Yeah, sheesh, what a mistake. So yeah, James jumped in with both feet, and it's been beautiful ever since.
And you guys have raised over $100,000.
That's insane.
It's fucking wild.
When I think about that, I just like I can't fathom that. I can't fathom that much money because that's just a lot of moolah.
Yeah, I think that we are at. Let me see where the team numbers at. So we've raised over $115,000 for Gillette Children's Specialty Healthcare.
Wow!
See, when I hear that number, James, I'll be honest. You know what I think of?
money.
Well, besides that, I think of like $1 million.
Yes,
because I cannot fathom that number.
$1,000 million. Oh, we went over our goal too. Jeez. I did not notice that. We were under our goal the last time I checked. We are over $20,312 this year.
Also, one thing I want to address before we go any further is I when I was getting the stream ready this morning, I popped on and I saw Molotov's message. And I want to say that I don't know why it hit me hard today, but it did. Hey, thank you. Because like that means a lot when people leave really nice messages or like say things. And you know, we've been really, really fortunate. Just like your brother's been really fortunate that we meet these people and they pop on to our stream and they want to be a part of things. And they are very, very supportive, and they're supportive for really good causes. It's really cool. Because I also am very, very aware that the internet is not always a bastion of kindness. So thank you. I don't even know if I know Molotov that well, but they always pop on. They say really, really, really cool stuff.
It's Robert Enzo.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, Robert. Thank you. Because people will pop on, and if I don't know them very well, and James can attest to this, I am addled. So sometimes like remembering people is hard for me. So yeah, it's incredible. And it's super cool, and it means a hell of a lot. So thank you. What a beautiful way to wake up in the morning and go on here and see someone say, hey, you know, really like shout us out, but not like kiss.
Yeah.
So thank you. I
yes,
know
you guys should be proud. It's really just such a cool thing, and
and again, I think
I'm lucky to have been a part of it. Just a tiny.
No, more than a tiny bit. You know, and that's something too. Like, I don't know if we talked about this during Extra Life because again, brain no work no more, so remembering things hard. For those that don't, know or what weren't here, if we discussed it before, like I don't think we would be streaming games if Duke and Curtis hadn't reached out and were like, "Hey, don't you do this?" And it's we started doing the damn thing, and it snowballed into because I don't remind me, James, you're the keeper of lore here. Were we doing Extra Life before TTRPG Theater or afterwards? I don't remember.
I don't know exactly when they started. I mean, we've been doing Extra Life, I think, before we got involved. When you did the stream for Domains of Dread, right? That was on TTRPG or TT.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's a terrible name. We've
regretted
that. we've regretted that name since we put it out there.
I just always screw it up, and that's. I mean, I also haven't said it in a while, so
right. That's also fair. But yes,
but yeah. I mean, I think that we kind of switched over to the model of streaming. You know,
because we were podcast boys.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we were streaming and doing other things. I think we were doing the podcast though. We weren't really doing much video. We would only do video for Extra Life.
Okay.
Because we wanted to stream, and be able to kind of show it off.
But before that, we were just straight up podcast boys.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
We were your good podcast boys.
Yeah. Good.
I can't even. I mean, and this is sad to say. So again, please give us your memory and insight. Let's start with Duke first. Duke, when did were you like running things previous to Curtis putting together his?
Oh yeah,
his all-star team of rabble-rousers.
Yeah, so I had 3 home games going on. The first one of that version started in 2015, I think. And then the other 2 picked up like towards the end of that year, beginning of 2016.
What were you running?
Just 5e.
Just 5e.
Yeah, everybody. It was easily accessible. You know, most of the people that I was playing with either were running or playing in 5e games already, or just getting into role-playing games, you know, into TTRPG. And so many of them were like, hey, what's this Dungeons and Dragons thing's about? Or I was like what you did to James. Hey, come over here. This way. I have this thing that we're going to do. You're going to have fun. I'm going to make you have fun with this. And I've made some lifelong D&D. Well, I've made a bunch of lifelong friends out of D&D. I mean, if I'm being honest. So I had taken a break from TTRPGs for a few years, partially because I didn't have the time, partially because I really couldn't find very many people to play. I had some games. I had a group of friends that we played GURPS and Shadowrun, and we played Mage. We played Werewolf. We played D&D. You know what I mean? We played a whole variety of things.
You were those good White Wolf boys.
Yeah, well, they were. White Wolf never really did it for me. I played because it was my group of friends that gamed together. I loved Shadowrun. GURPS. It depended on who was running whether I liked GURPS or not. One of my friends was actually one of the original team that put GURPS together, or maybe he was the second wave. I think he might have been the second wave. But when we did all that board game stuff, I don't know if you remember that. We had
I vaguely do.
We were part of a group that was basically building out a new board game company, and the 2 guys that started that board game company worked for Fantasy Flight for years. And
were you in the same testing group as I was with John Goodenough, which is still one of my favorite names of all time? When he was at Fantasy Flight.
Oh yeah, yes,
yeah, because John was so at the time, and we're not going to get too far in the weeds because God, can I get in the weeds quick? I play every Wednesday. I played board games with. Sometimes you might hear me reference someone called the Czar, a buddy of mine who I don't know how to explain.
Anyway, you play every Wednesday.
Yeah, with David Richardson, the Czar, and David knew John from Fantasy Flight, and so we would play. There would be like 4 or 5 of us that played like literally every single Wednesday. We played just whatever we decided to play. So John started giving us stuff to play test because he was like, well, I mean, I know you guys and you play constantly, so why don't you just play test stuff? And we got to play test some really neat stuff, and it was just like kind of a cool experience. And then he left Fantasy Flight. It was like, oh, well, guess we're not going to be able to do this anymore.
There goes the hookup.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so,
that was kind of back in the golden age of Fantasy Flight, though, where they did stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Because they don't do that anymore.
No, none of them do that
No,
anymore.
yeah, no more free stuff for you.
Right. Yeah. So I had some pretty regular games going before TTRP Theater started. And then I was in a production of Noises Off at Pittsburgh State University. And Gorillas. It was one of the most amazing live theater productions I've ever been a part of. It was, I mean, dude, we tore the house down every night. And 3 of the people in that show were all like, oh, you play Dungeons and Dragons? I was like, yeah, I do. We should all go play Dungeons and Dragons together.
I played Dungeons and Dragons. What of it?
And, I was always that guy that, people were like, oh, fucking nerds. And I'm like, you can come over right now. We can open the books and I will show you how this works. And I'll make you a nerd too. Let's go be nerds.
I will force you into your nerddom.
Yeah.
Surrender to your nerddom.
Anyway, so that's where Curtis and Jaylee and Erica came from. And Curtis had this idea. He was in love with Critical Role and all of that sort of stuff, and really wanted to learn production and all of the things that surround it. And so he dove in head first and started learning that stuff and asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. And here we are 5.5 years later.
Well, and I will say this, I will be forever grateful to the fact that by doing that, it wasn't like we were like never like speaking, but that was something where it turned into us like kind of doing what people who've known each other forever but live far away do, where it's like, oh yeah, my friend, to literally like, hey, you want to do this thing? You want to do this thing?
It really did.
Weird thing.
It reignited you and I's friendship in a lot of ways. I mean, we had been in touch, since Facebook started, and you had always been, far away friend, but yeah, that definitely kind of kicked our friendship back into, like talking and interacting as friends do instead of as Facebook friends do. So
one of the things I would point out too for you and I, because I don't remember if you played with did you ever play with Brian Lynch and Joey Call and those guys? Because they were like secret nerds.
No, because they were such secret nerds.
Yeah. So Brian, like when he found out I was doing the thing with you, he was so much like, I am so goddamn jealous. Because I miss doing that. And I was like, well, you could do it if you wanted. He was like, I got too much stuff on my plate. But he was like, it's so cool to know you guys are still doing it.
Yeah.
And I just was like, that's really neat. Like, because I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons at Brian's house. Like, where it would be that thing of like, much like Curtis Nineswinder and those guys having comic book collections and going, don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. Right.
Yeah, don't tell anyone I like comics. And I'm like, why? I love comics. I tell everybody I love comics. And they're like, yeah, but like, just don't. All right.
Have you seen, I just brought this up the other night. Have you seen The Comedians of Comedy with Patton Oswalt and Brian Posehn and Zach Galifianakis?
I don't think I have. I think I'm peripherally aware of it.
And Maria Bamford. So it's this documentary about them taking this tour of rock clubs. And there's this one scene where Patton Oswalt and Brian Posehn go to the comic book shop. And they're in the back of a cab and they're driving away. And Patton Oswalt's just kind of staring out the window. And he goes, and I'm going to fuck this quote up, but he's basically like, he's talking about his love of comics, but how much shame he feels around, the idea of the rest of society and how he feels, how that makes him feel about, You know what I mean? And it was for so long for us of our generation. We were, you know, I wanted a Marvel movie more than anything else when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, and now it's cool, which I'm grateful for.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I remember like there was a lot of us who really liked that stuff, and then some of us just never grew out of it.
Right. But the hiding of it, you know what I mean? The feeling that you had to hide it. That's what I'm talking about. You know, that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, there were definitively people that we both knew who we grew up around who, you know, they hit a lot of stuff.
Right. Well, yeah, that's true. Anyway, prep school. It's 8:22.
Yeah, so what are you guys working on? Because I'm already ready to roll for Monday night. So I don't necessarily have anything that I'm like that's pressing for me to prep, because Chaos Scar's been like canceled a whole bunch. Because if you don't know, I don't run unless I have more than 2 players, and sometimes I don't have more than 2 players. But so what are you guys up to? What's the haps? Give me the lowdown. Tell me the tale of your people.
James? No, go ahead, James.
So I backed this really phenomenal series by Niels Jansen and Rose Whitaker called The Traveler's Guide to the Seasong Islands. And they've done a couple of these now, and I've been really kind of enraptured by the other things that they've done. And they do these pairs. So there's a traveler's guide, and then there's a game master's companion. And the traveler's guide is literally like a traveler's guide. It's like an old school kind of zine style setup. But it's like you have like basically a tourist book of this series of islands. There's a whole kind of cultural narrative to it, and like a guide to each of the islands. Really nice, beautiful hand-drawn maps. And then there's just a ton of things filled in with different species, flora, fauna, things like that in the kind of back half of it. In the and like food and like recipes, like it's just incredible. The Game Master's Companion has the same thing, but it's broken down with more details. Like it doesn't necessarily kind of like set up a sort of kind of module per se, but it gives you more kind of things to do. Some kind of custom things for foraging and tracking in the Seasong Islands. And then each of them, it gives a more detailed map than you find in the Traveler's Guide, as well as like secrets of each of the islands or kind of backstory of each of the islands, so that you can essentially kind of create your own, adventures. And then goes more into detail. And the kind of back half of this is like set up with traders and shops, with NPCs, with these really amazing kind of custom stat blocks that tie into the narrative. So I've been kind of just obsessed with this a little bit, because for everybody that hasn't heard me regale them with the latest stories, we spun off Drakewind Falls, which ran for about 20 episodes when Warrior left, and we kind of floated about for a while. We did some one shots and some other things, and then finally we're like, okay, let's get going. And I said, okay, well, we spent all this time. We did Microscope for a long time, Ben Robbins' game, and created the Drakewind Falls universe. And I was like, okay, well, let's do another series. So we did another series of kind of 3 rounds of lenses, and we kind of built out this archipelago, which while we're chatting, I can pick out the art for it that Joel did. But it really kind of took on a life of its own. I really wanted to do something. We played this Bardcore Brawlers 2 years ago, I think, maybe for the first time, maybe longer than that. I don't know, at Extra Life. I think it was 2022. And then we played again last year, and I love bards, and I, for all of the kind of like ins and outs of the player's guide and the Dungeon Master's Guide for 5e, I just love the description of a bard in that, and they talk about they each tap into the song of the world in their own way, and bring it to life, and that's like the magics. And so I thought that something that was similar to Bardcore Brawlers without necessarily just relying on that system of like shared charisma would be fun. And so I like spun this out into kind of its own thing, and we jokingly called it Oops All Bards to start with, because everybody had to start with at least one level of bard. I think it started at level 3, and so it's ended up being this really kind of fun kind of alternative to what we had been playing. I think, as Ben will probably attest, and Duke, if you ever had the pleasure of playing with Warrior Ryan, he brings something I think really special to a game, and so it actually took me a while as a DM to like get my poop in a group and like figure out how to DM for a three person party again. It was actually, I found it to be incredibly difficult. I just couldn't kind of get my head around how I was doing it and what it looked like, and so it was kind of difficult, but we've found our footing now, I think. And I've been looking for other modules or things that I could incorporate that would help me to kind of build out in addition to some of these, and just get some inspiration, because I feel like you guys have probably been doing it for 4 times as long as I have.
That doesn't matter.
It just sometimes you just can't. I just have been having a block lately with some of this stuff. I find myself being really inspired when I'm doing the world building, and then sometimes I'm getting in and just having that sound that used to go when you connected to the internet.
Burnout's real, man.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about it. Like, imagine burnout of imagination is frighteningly real, and it happens so goddamn much where you lose your ability to find focus on the next thing you want to do.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating. It's really, really frustrating.
Especially in long-term campaigns, right?
Yeah.
Like you can have a great framework, and then your players make decisions and you have to pivot, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, wait, oh God. Now what? Now how do I keep them engaged in this? It's a thing. And Jazz is our current DM, and this is his first time DMing, and he's DMing 5e for the first time. And dude, we started off so strong. I mean, so strong. He had all of this framework and was doing all of this amazing writing and these introductions and this, and we're in session 20, probably 24, somewhere in there. And you can just tell, like, he's, with real life and all the rest of those things, the fire is gone a little bit. He's struggling, and we're towards the end of it too, which is always hard, right? Writing an ending, that's the hardest fucking part.
I find that to be so. My thing, like, one thing, I don't know if I was talking about this on the stream or just talking to someone about it, that I either want to rush to my cool ending, I want to sprint there because I'm like, I got this cool thing I want to do, or I run out of the ability to think of an ending that I feel like will do justice to the work that the players have put in. And it's infuriating. So I'm always a fan of seeing someone who can make their story, like, they can forge it into something that actually works the whole way through. It's just not something I'm currently very capable of.
Well, but also think about it this way. How many games the games that you have run over time, how many games have actually made it to an ending before the group fell apart and timing and scheduling? You know what I mean? And I've had
enough.
Maybe six campaigns in total that made it to like an ending. Yeah,
that's hard to do. It really is. I mean, I think that it's like, and especially when I think the other hard thing to do is having to think of an ending.
right.
Like, where do I see this going without then forcing that ending?
Beard, you said that you're struggling with 3 players. How many do you normally, or you know what I mean? Where are you most comfortable? Is it at 5, 6, 8?
Yeah, I'm usually the Drakewind was 4, and the game that I played before that, I mean, Tasty Boys ranged. It was usually 4 to 5. But I find that 5e is I feel like it's easiest to build encounters for 4 people. I also don't love when I have an uneven number, because ultimately the game that I ran for, I don't know, God, how many episodes did Tasty Boys go? Like 150 or something like that?
Yeah, it was
a bunch.
I mean, it was years and years and years and years. And
years and years and years of bullshit we're doing.
Yeah, and when it was 5 players, there tended to be some power dynamics that were not healthy, and eventually, led to me saying, okay, I want to wrap this up the way I want to wrap this up. And if we play further, it can be, it can be, flashbacks, it can be flash forwards, it can be, get the gang back together, it can be Doctor Who style. I don't care, but I really wanted to end it the way I wanted to end it. And 4 just felt, good. I mean, basically the 2 folks that I think had and ended up having kind of the most tension and like just not, kind of a healthy power dynamic. They weren't a part of the new game, but the other 3 were, and we added Christy, who, if you've played with Christy's a gem. I mean, she's such a versatile role player. She also runs, and she's just creative as shit. And so, I mean, everything that we built for Drakewind was the intention of kind of a 4-person party. And I think I just got used to that. I think that I enjoy playing in like a 4 or 5-person party too, because it feels, this sounds weird, but it feels like most D&D-ish in my brain, that like,
no, you're right. It's it's the most balanced.
It's like classic. Yeah. Like everything, there's a role for each person to play, and that everybody gets to play those roles regularly. Whereas I think sometimes, with a 3-person group, especially with them all having at least 1 level of bard, it's taken them a while to kind of like get to the point where they feel, I think maybe where they feel kind of like into their characters as well.
Well, and I think it's hard to run when there is a competition of a bunch of people saying I have to get my shit in.
Yeah.
And when you run with a group like your all bards group, there isn't that.
Mm-mm.
There isn't a feeling of, and I blame a little bit of this on just the nature of the folks we were playing with being professional wrestlers, by and large, who all felt like, well, I got to get my fucking spots in, brother. It's just a different mindset of performance of like, well, I have to shine. If I don't shine, then that means someone else is getting my time.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And I think that's, just the nature of the particular thing that most of those guys did. But I think the hard thing, and also I think the other part of it was when you have a bunch of people who think of D&D as a board game kind of thing where there's got to be a winner and there's got to be a loser. And, I think our goal was to teach a couple of those people, like, you don't win D&D. You win by telling a story and then still going, so did I win D&D?
Yeah.
What's my interception score?
Right.
Type of situation. It's not bad. It's just sometimes those habits that mindset is really, really hard to get people out of.
Well, and I think that's part of the argument. You know what I mean? You see it often, and I think it's a little reductive. But you have the people that, you know, argue, what do I do with the min maxer? What do I do? You know,
let them play.
Right, you let them play. See, and I'm the opposite. Right now I'm running. Well, we've only run probably 3 sessions, but my younger son Simon. So I'm running a 1-on-1 game with him. You know, just
I need to know more about how
tabletop. It's hilarious. It's so funny. He's so fun. He basically, so Simon got really deep into Tekken lore about 1.5 years ago. And we've always played Tekken. Like Tekken is that's the one game that I will always play forever.
This is awesome.
Yeah.
It's got like the craziest characters.
And he basically kind of took Yoshimitsu, and because that's his main. Jesus,
Yoshimitsu's amazing.
Oh my god, I can't. As soon as he picks Yoshimitsu, it doesn't matter what main I pick. I know that I'm 90% of the time going to lose. Anyway, so he took the idea of Yoshimitsu.
I know Simon and I don't know if we've ever even spoken.
I don't know that you have.
But like, just it's frightening to know how similar we are, for better and for worse, that your son and I are like this weird, like there's a weird kind of kismet of just being the people that we are. It makes me so goddamn happy.
Oh, you two would, I mean, I'm telling you, you would be fast friends. So I'm running that. I'm playing in Desert City, but that's a 3-person group, and I ran that same group of friends, 3 people, for basically the last 5 years, a little over. One of my favorite games I ever ran was 2 players. I've run plenty of 5 and 6 player and 7 player games. I get bogged down in those. I get lost in those, and I feel like I'm not giving the people at the table the time that they deserve. So I always struggle when it's more than 4. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting that's, you know, you're on the other side of that. My perfect group is 3. Like that's where I feel the most comfortable, is with 3 players. It gives time, you know what I mean? Especially if they're into the backstory and they give me at least a page or, you know, 2 pages worth of their own lore. Like one of the things I'm prepping for now is we have our next arc is going back to the Prowlers and Paragons game, and using the characters from our Renaissance City game, but I'm not DMing that game. I'm playing a character. But then I am planning for the arc after that, and I think we're going to go D&D. I talked about Dungeon World, but my guys don't like learning new games. They're just bad at it.
So here's
I'm dragging them kicking and screaming through this version of 5e because none of them have played 5e before. And they're like, oh, I have channeled divinity. What is that? And I'm like, you picked a cleric, dude.
Reading is hard.
Uncanny dodge? You don't know what that is? You're a rogue. Anyway, so yeah, it's interesting when you say that 3 players is a struggle, because that's my wheelhouse. That's where I'm most comfortable.
And I think it might just, it might be the 3 players in particular, right? I think that, Warrior is such a look before you leap type of person. He's the min-maxer that doesn't do it for the max.
Right. That's a great way to describe it.
And I think that Christy will occasionally do that, but Nate and Joel particularly, Joel will poke, but Joel will not necessarily instigate, if that makes sense.
Did you just go Joel poke, but not instigate?
Yeah.
Once
the doors
he attack
open,
and protect.
Joel will go ham. But
Yes,
like until
that's
that point, like I think that he feels good in that not supporting like class role, but supporting player role. Like he's a great ensemble player. I think he's like Joel to me is like a character actor, you know. He always fills a role, whether it's, you know, the class or type that you need, or just thinking thinking about, you know, what's good for the story and what's also good for everyone's story, not just like my own stuff. And so, yeah, I think that, you know, in a way, I have like Francis McDermott and like I had Gary Cole and like William H. Macy, and like Worrier is, I don't know, Warrior's Brad Pitt or George Clooney or something, you know, like somebody who's going to be that like lead, but is also really good in ensemble. And I think that that's, you know, I think that that's part of it too, is just kind of seeing what, you know, what it does. I didn't realize that I like burnt my, my arm yesterday when I was doing some, baking, and I really burnt the crap out of it. Anyway,
what were you baking? Just because
we had, a rigatoni. I guess it was the day before last, but yeah, wow. I didn't really think they burnt it that bad. Anyway. Yeah. Also, Ben, I shared I took the heel turn off of the other thing, so I can't share. Like it's not a thing. So I have shared my screen, but I can't like share my screen. That's
like this.
Joel's yeah, here I can make a little bigger.
Oh, that's right.
But this is, you know, Drakewind Falls, where we were before. Let me see. Make a little pointy thing. Can you see my little pointy thing now? No.
Yeah. I can see.
Yeah. So this ridge of mountains, Drakewind Falls, was like in this kind of high peak here, and then this archipelago is where we're playing now. And I was thinking this kind of Seasong Islands could fit somewhere into the archipelago, but there's this main island down here, you know, and this it's such a rich like place. I mean, everything, you know, we started, you know, breaking up all the kind of like city states and stuff just real quick, but you know, Joel's just so fun to work with because we're, you know, he's doing this quick sketch and then going in and making all these little things, and you know, this entire I don't know. This entire setting has so much richness, and we've made so many characters from Extra Life and everything else that it's just yeah. Oh, can't show you that. Anyway,
none of that
secret. But yeah, you know, I mean,
Secrets are not fun. Secrets
well, whoever he is, I love him. That's
yes. So yeah, it's a lot of fun to kind of work with, but yeah, I think it's more kind of, you know, missing that leading man, you know, like this. I'm running Fargo right now, and I'm used to running, you know, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? There's got to be a paterfamilias, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to have the bona fide, right?
You got to have the bona fide.
You got to have the bona fide.
True words are never spoken.
And it's but the one of the things that I always try to strive for is changing, like, through the storytelling. It's why I ask for lore, right? It's why I ask for backstories.
Yeah.
So that I can pivot one of them into that bona fide state, right? Yeah. And make the story about them for a while. And it doesn't have to be forever. But that's the trick that I learned a long time ago. But it's also getting them to give you that backstory. You know, yeah. I mean, we've all been doing this long enough. You will always have the one guy that's going to give you 14 pages. And then everybody else will give you a paragraph.
And that's Ryan.
Yeah, right. Yes, absolutely. 100%. It's Warrior. I started a game with him in the Root system by Magpie Games.
That's a great system. And Magpie makes really good games.
Magpie makes really good games.
They don't get talked about enough.
Yeah,
I mean, it's really a shame.
But it was a struggle for everybody but Warrior, because they didn't understand that it's not that, because that game is just about going in and fucking shit up. Like, it is, you are basically a guerrilla warrior, who is just, you run into the city, you kill all the cops, you save the maiden, and you get out. And you do as much destruction to the oligarchy as you possibly can. And he was the only one that got it. Everybody else was like, well, what's my move? And I don't and I'm like, oh no, this isn't about winning or losing. This isn't about, any of those things. This is just about creating destruction and chaos within this ridiculously capitalistic, oppressive colonial system. You are just here to fuck shit up. And yeah, so yeah, Warrior is always so fun to play with. But anyway, that it is that getting that person, or getting everyone to give you enough. And I take, being an actor, I have them do character breakdowns for me, right? Like, that's how I've learned to do it, is I give them 12 or 15 questions and say, answer these questions for me, even if it's just a sentence. And then if there's something interesting, I go back to them and I say, okay, what about this makes you think this? And we dig into a couple of those things and I try to help them build out something within the world, so that they have links to more than just, oh, my mom's a librarian in Silvery Moon. Yeah. So I don't know. That's how I try to always be shifting that spotlight to ensure that someone is the paterfamilias, as you so eloquently put it.
I think, I've noticed one of the big issues I keep running into with my games, for me, is I don't do that very well. I'm so caught up with, this was the dumb thing that popped into my head at 2:00 in the morning, the story I want to tell. It's just, I don't care who's on the ride, but the ride must go forward. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The more I've thought about it, it's like, does it rob players of agency? But at the same time, it's also the idea of any archetype then can fit. I don't know. It's a kind of a weird. It's a strange dynamic, because I will hear people who I super respect run games like that, and I'm just so blown away by how they're doing it, because it seems so goddamn difficult.
I see, and I struggle with story structure. I struggle with keeping them, because I have been running that way for so long, because it is I'm so used to using random encounter generators and all of that, and just playing off of them and the decisions that they make, that I struggle to keep my story going. And then I get lucky. Excuse me. I will get lucky, and they will make some decisions, and I'll be like, oh, here's that. Here, put that right there. You know what I mean? Here's that hook. That hook will fit. And then we go off for another 14 sessions, not following any of the real story, and then put another hook in. So to keep that momentum of the story itself going, it's not easy.
No,
at least for me, it's not easy.
Beard, what about you?
It's a good question.
Just said it all. That literally just said it all.
Yeah, he's gonna have as little hair as me by the end of this.
I think that one of the things is, I think I got comfortable running online, to be honest with you. I think that, frankly, I've run more online than I've run in person. I mean, we started doing Tasty Boys D&DDT in your basement, but I mean, we had to stop. We hit the pandemic, and and then you weren't in the group, and then we started running elsewhere, and Nate hosted, and I hosted a bit, and we played a Fantasy Flight for a little while, but then I mean, we shifted to streaming at a certain point, and I mean, we were online essentially for 3 years. And I think I just got used to it. I mean, I got used to having a big screen in front of me, and my table out, and everything, and I use different parts of my brain when I have to do as much prep. If I can quickly look up a stat block, or like Duke was saying, right, like something is so good that you just go with it. I not kind of having some of that in the back of my brain, or able to kind of like pull on that as much. I think there's a real luxury of having everything at your fingertips as soon as you can think of it. Really in the 5 seconds it takes me to pull up an extra window next to it, and look something up. I can shift, and I can pivot pretty quick. But I also think that all of that at a certain point was relatively higher stakes. I mean, we told long stories, but I also got used to the kind of comfort and cushion of a couple of years of backstory, right? If I needed a hook, I could pull a hook out of thin air, right? I could have Lust come back, or I could have the gnome tinkers that had the airship come back, or I could pull on a romantic thread, or I could pull on a random other Tasty Boys franchise, or I could pull one of your characters back as an NPC for a little bit. And I think that there's something that that is to be said for a campaign that runs that long, and you just kind of like the recency bias of kind of what's in front of you when you're kind of starting fresh. You kind of go, oh, this isn't as good as that other thing. And it's not that it isn't as good, it's just it's not as old, it's not as complex. It's like tasting chili an hour in and going, oh, this doesn't taste as good as when it's done. Well, no shit. But I think that sometimes that can be really challenging, whether you're streaming or when you're doing it in person. I think it hits even harder for me, honestly. Like when I'm streaming, I can be like, oh, like I can go back and watch this, whereas when I'm doing it, even when we first started doing this session, I was kind of like, can I just record this so I could listen to it back? Because I got so used to that. Worrier would go through and do statistics, and I'd go back through and do like notes and kind of a recap, because we had to put out the episode, and I had to have a description for the episode. So I had to know, I had to remember what the fuck happened, and leave a dangler for the next session. And I think that because I don't do that, it doesn't feel as complete to me, I think.
Yeah,
that's fair.
And I don't know that I want it, like that I need that anymore. But at the same rate, it's like, oh man, I felt like I remembered more. I wasn't pulling on random threads as much, because that stresses me out. I can't bend. I can't just pull something out of thin air and then either like let it be free, or roll it into something. I get like in my own head about the lore, and want to make sure that like I know it, and I can like pull from it. And so I started using like Notion to keep track of everything. And so it's about kind of finding that balance for me too, just knowing that I'm one of the storytellers, not the storyteller, and figuring out what game do I actually like playing.
What kind of story do you want to tell? And what, and also I think that sometimes it boils down to like remembering, and I'm not always the best at this, that like this is a communal storytelling thing, that like it's not necessarily always needs to be the story that But the
that
story,
size says it all too.
well, I think it's more like sometimes I will forget that it's certainly okay for me to. I'm trying to find the best way of putting this because it's not a negative thing, but for me to be like, okay, well, I'm giving up the full amount of like I'm completely giving up the director's chair because this now is has taken on such a life of its own.
Yeah.
I do have a tendency to like think in my head like, well, this is where I want it to go, so shouldn't it go where I want it to go? And I sometimes have to wrestle with that fact and remember like, well, that's not really the point of things. Because I will get in my head about like, well, this is cooler. My thing is cooler. Like, come on, guys. Don't you want to do what I want to do? Because it's cooler. And it's just not. It defeats the purpose.
Yeah, one of the things that broke me from that was learning and playing Prowlers and Paragons. Because the system itself, if the players exceed a certain threshold, they get the narrative. Period. Like it's their narrative. And sometimes the threshold will allow the GM to embellish. Sometimes the GM gets the narrative and the player gets to embellish. But it's fully built into the mechanic where they get the story. They got 16 successes and the threshold was 12. It's their scene. You tell me you tell the rest of us what happens in this scene, and it's truth. And so that has, because I like you, Ben, you know what I mean, growing up it was always the DM. It's the DM story, that was how we grew up playing that game. And
that person is giving you the facts of the story, and
right.
Everyone has to operate within that set of facts.
They're the single point of truth.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think there's something beautiful about that, but at the same time, there's something extremely limiting about it as well.
Agreed. The players, fuck, man. I mean, how many times have you gone, oh shit, I never thought about that. That's really fucking cool.
Or why didn't I think of this?
How did that not occur to me? How did that not occur to me? It happens to me at least every other session that I run.
So I would also ask both of you, are you someone who is like, there's a part of me that desperately needs to have some control over this in some direction, or are you someone who is like, fuck it, we'll do it live. Let me improv my ass off for your daughters and sons. Just like let me just bring this sweet heat of just weird improv.
I think it depends on the system. And I think for me, it depends on what the goal is. Like if I'm streaming, I definitely want some kind of structure because to me, this is a form of entertainment and I am trying to, at least tell somewhat of a structured story that has a beginning, middle, and end. But at the same time, I thrive in giving my players agency and playing off of them. I think a lot of that comes from theater background and doing improv, for 20 plus years of my life. That it's so important to me that it's a collaborative effort. And plus I hang out with really smart, funny people. And I want them to make me laugh and I want them to make me cry. And, so if it's a home game, I definitely do less of the structuring and the full prep if it's a home game. But if it's a streamed game, I like to at least have 3 sides of a frame. Okay. And then try to figure out how the players put the last piece, into that frame. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, what about you, James?
I mean, I think given the stability of my my groups and the fact that most of them have been these long-term games, strangely enough, I mean, it's either that or Extra Life, and I think all of those are meant to be kind of drive it like you stole it. And so I find that I've become much more comfortable with being uncomfortable about where things go. Just generally, I don't know that I've gotten tremendously better at like the process of it, or processing it in real time, but I have always realized that if I step back with the players that we play with, someone's stepping into that space. I think I've gotten a lot more comfortable with not having to feel like I have to have the next thing. It's like, if y'all went off the rails, like, tell me where the rails are going. Like, I would rather give them the agency to plot that next course before I plot it in response. And sometimes sometimes that's in response, and sometimes that's in reaction. And I don't want that reaction to kind of put them in a space, or us as a group in a space that's going to be like not productive and generative. And so most of the time I just kind of I don't yes and I say sure, and like, okay.
Yeah, you do that really well. I wish I was
well, then tell me if that's the deep end you're jumping into. Tell me what's in there and how deep it is, and I'll add some things to it. But I think that people make choices for a reason, and if that's to be a chaos demon, that's fine. And if it's because they, like
if your friends are goblins, then
some unanticipated, brilliant thing that you didn't even see in your own story, or in a module that you're running. I mean, sometimes people just see things that I don't see, whether it's because they've played longer, or because they have a different worldview, or because they just had a day at work and would really like to provoke. I mean. Sometimes they burn down the bar, Ben.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, yeah, we have some friends who that's like their default state.
Well, and there's a reason it's a trope, because it's not just I mean, it's a thing that happens with players in every game. It doesn't matter if you've been playing forever, if you've been playing a short time, if you've never played before. Somebody in the group is going to be a murder hobo. Somebody in the group is going to, try to kill the merchant because they didn't give them the healing potion for 5 gold. It's something that's going to happen, no matter the group of players, because, like you said, maybe they need to provoke something today because they had a bad day at work. So
whenever I hear that, all I can think is, so you had a bad day, you killed a merchant. It's like, it's a very much like it is a weird tropey thing, but it's also like part and parcel to like playing D&D as a kid too. Like, just being like, it's like a weird thing about the game of like, oh, so there's no rules, so I can do whatever I want.
I can do anything. Yeah,
I can do anything. I can go.
Yeah, I did
murder spree.
Right. Yeah. Renaissance City, like, it was supposed to be like, the game itself is built into very much like Silver Age comics, right? Where the heroes are heroes, but my players took this turn at one point, and one of the characters, to protect the other characters, ended up killing one of the NPCs, and I was not ready for it. I was not ready for it at all, but he had the scene, and it's what he did with it. And I went, okay, well, now we're playing a different game.
Yeah.
Like, everything in this game is now completely different than it was 3 minutes ago. And it's learning to, be comfortable in that change, and trying to figure out with everyone around you how how you all can be comfortable with that change.
Well, there's such a weird thing of like sphere of control in role-playing games of like, you're the GM. Ostensibly, you're running the game. But the reality is you're just facilitating.
Right.
You're not running anything. You're just there to go, I guess, or yeah, sure. Or you know what? I don't know if we can do that. Or sometimes just flat out. And I try to do this very rarely of just going like, no, you can't do that. But by and large, and sometimes I'm not sure players understand this, and sometimes I'm not sure I fully understand it. But my job in running those games is like just to set the table, and they get to go buck wild, or sometimes they just do what they're gonna. Sometimes they like latch on to the story you're telling, or to the framework you've laid down, and then they go in such directions where you get to say at the end, like, yeah, that's kind of the story I had in mind, and it all worked out in the end. It's such an odd, like the more I think about it, it's such an odd form of storytelling, because there's so much of improv in it, but there's so much as well of just letting go, of just saying, okay, sure, yeah, let's do that. I don't know. I feel like I'm not explaining it very well, but
I think one of the keys is knowing who your NPCs are, and knowing what your NPCs' motivations are. I think that's the biggest key to being a good DM. Is, there's always going to be again, it's another trope. You describe them walking by a person, by a hobbit, a halfling on the street, and they're like, oh, well, what's his name? And you're like, it's
they never want to talk to the guy you want them to talk to. They just want to talk.
It's K-Wo Chat Boy, and then they're like, oh, well, what's K-Wo Chat Boy's deal? That's a thing that it will always happen. We did it to Jazz. We were in the temple, and one of our characters went to talk to like the servants and the help, and got this real detailed conversation with one of the dishwashers, and there was a second dishwasher, and he went to the second dishwasher and was like, so what's your deal? And he was like, my name's Traymore, I wash dishes. So guess who came along with us?
Yes.
Traymore. Right. Because that's a thing that happens. But it is, and I don't know if Jazz did it or not, but I've done it several times where they haven't met this NPC that I have planned yet, but they get really interested in this gnome, clerk at the city hall. Well, guess what? This NPC over here is now the gnome clerk at the city hall. And everything that this NPC knew that they were going to get introduced to 5 sessions from now the gnome clerk that they're in love with, he's that guy that knows all of those things. Yeah. That's how I like to pivot in those ways, to kind of make sure that I at least also have some agency in the story instead of just solely relying on the players.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's very difficult, because your players are like, somehow in some way, I feel like they're like instinctively built to surprise you in really cool ways. But sometimes those cool ways are just, especially like, let's say your brain isn't there that day, it's taking a day off. It's just overwhelming. It's just like, what are we doing? What? This is a game, right? I'm supposed to be having fun, because I have forgotten how to. I don't know if anyone else runs into that situation at all, where you're just like, I can't do it. I run into this with Star Wars all the time, where I have to not hard retcon, but I have to soft retcon things, like before, like right as we're getting into the session.
How do you deal with burnout, James?
God. Shopping episodes.
Okay, that's
you
fair.
do a great job of that.
No, I think that I've been really fortunate enough to have players that recognize it a bit. if that makes sense, whether we're playing or if we just need to like take a week off, I think that that's really hard, because I think that, to some extent, and I'll be real, like our solar system or our galaxy is Ben and I running games. For our friend group, I'm not counting kind of like Zach's, solar system over here, because I think that he has access to some people that don't play in our games. But, I think that there's Ben and I running games. And I think that, the challenging thing is that sometimes we're both burnt out at the same point. And we have like very different outcomes for that too. Like I don't have any health concerns that I know about, so most of the time, like if it's something that like I need to take some time, like I have to dig into that, and I think that it sucks and it's unfair that there's times where, that we have something where like, Ben just like it's sick, and like we step away. And I think that there's this kind of really weird, there's this really weird kind of expectation on our times, that it's like, we must be healthy and happy and thoughtful and like creative. I think I run into this too, like teaching or when I was practicing, like any creative endeavor, it's like sometimes you just don't have it, and that's for like different reasons, and it's hard because I think that it's very unfair to have any comparisons because I think we both run so uniquely. I mean, I borrow and steal from Ben liberally because I like to, he's my steward into the game. So I, just like in Minecraft with Doug, like Doug teach Ben teach James teach David teach nephew. I think D&D's like that, a lot. And so I think that, to a certain extent, burnout's the same, right? I think that I see I've seen, like what works or doesn't work for Ben, or for other people that I see that run. And then, and then kind of like thinking about what kind of game I like to participate in. I also have to think about like, what do I do or how do I do it when, my daughter got a churro making kit.
Yeah.
Little churro boys.
Teach her how to make. She's learning how to make that shoe dough. That's yeah.
So I guess this is the answer to churros. But I mean
churros help.
Let's be honest,
That's
churros are like an answer to a lot of these questions.
And I'm in California, and let me tell you about the churros. Holy moly. It is, and I'm in Northern California, so it's even different than SoCal, but golly, the tamales and the churros, man, there are stands about every 2 miles up here, just someone selling fresh churros or someone selling fresh tamales.
Sounds like being down on the Gulf Coast and being able to get like shrimp and crawfish and it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
What do we have here?
It's a wonderful regional option that I have that I did not have when I was living in Kansas.
What are you talking about?
There were great. Trust me, I had some great food options when I was in Kansas, but it's churros and tacos and tamales out here.
We're not one
amazing.
of them.
And I think, like ironically, that's kind of it, right? We all have our little like regional dialect of how we run and how we manage stress. And, like, I think that it's, to me, I think that the best thing that you can do, and I always tell students this too, is, if you're working with trades or if you're working with engineers or you're working with, other design professions, it's like, you should have the common courtesy to be able to speak, conversational engineerese, not because you're going to be able to do it or you're going to be smarter than them or you're going to tell them what to do, but because you're going to know when you need help and to be able to articulate like how you need help. And I think that as a DM is like you're speaking the same language, but you have to have a different affectation as the person who's like running things, And so I think that to a certain extent, communicating, if you're a player and you're like, oh, I'm going to be sick and I'm going to be out, you can be like, oh, okay, yeah, like Dunderfoot, Churro Snap is he's going to be taking he's got to go see his what?
Did you just say Dunderfoot Churro Snap?
Yeah, Dunderfoot Churro Snap.
Okay, because I desperately need to know everything about Dunderfoot Churro Snap now.
Well,
like,
he was born.
Who is he?
What? He was born a poor hobbit in Buckleberry Ferry. No, but yeah, I mean, it's just different, right? When you're running the game, we've talked about this before. I mean, it's just the kind of guilt of not being able to run or taking time off. It's like, when you're doing that as a player, it's kind of like, oh, I'm kind of like, I'm missing out. You don't think like, oh, everybody else is missing out on me. But when you're running, you're like, well, there's no session,
right.
That feels bad,
It does.
Well, and I struggle with that often. We've taken some long breaks, in the TTRP thing, in the TTRP theater side of things because of real life, right? Yes. And I personally have to get over my own frustrations in those things because I want a new episode out every week. Like I want to stay on schedule. When we can't get together for a certain amount of time, I get anxious and I get even angry inside. I don't really let that out very often, but I do. I struggle with that side of things when I'm like, okay, we planned this 3 weeks ago and you're telling me right now, and I have all of these responsibilities and, and then I have to step back and go, okay, hold on. This is just a game. This is supposed to be fun for everyone. I'm supposed to be having fun with this. So stop beating yourself up. Stop being angry at or sad or anxious that, this is happening. It's okay because life happens and, it's okay to feel your feelings and it's okay to take time off. It's okay to allow others, the grace that you insist on, anyway, I struggle in that space at times too. You said, you said something and I was going to ask you a question about it. Now I don't remember. Anyway, how are the churros?
They're really delightful. They're really delightful. Yeah. Thank you. They're in watching a movie in the other room. I mean, and as someone who has, a lot more background on the kind of acting side of things and improv, I think it's really interesting to hear the perspective of, it's a show must go on kind of thing, which is, and also a terrible trope, but it's also like a terrible reality of, trying to figure out, kind of what it is. And I think that, a little bit, kind of about kind of us here, it's also kind of like, oh, well, maybe I don't want to run a game right now. Maybe I want to like have somebody else run a game. But like, when people don't step into that space, then it's basically kind of like, oh, okay, well, like we can run or there won't be a game,
right.
Or you can go find a game to join, or you can go, do that. And to a certain extent, I could do that. I probably should do that. I think probably be healthy to, to do that. So it's not the same thing. Cause one of the things I've told Ben before is, when he invites me to be part of games, sometimes I have to say, for me, I find it really muddies the waters. I have a harder time playing a character when I'm playing with the same people, but just in a different game. Like if he's running something for, Nate and Warrior and, Cassandra and myself, but I have, Nate and Warrior in my game every week and they play something that's maybe a little similar, like, just like I said, kind of some of the character actor things. I have a harder time keeping that game straight from this game. And I'm thinking so much about that I don't actually get to enjoy the game because it's not that Ben's running the same game or that it's like samey in the setup or the narrative or something like that, but it's like not unique in my in my brain, you know.
Right.
And
The
so
mental gymnastics are, it's a lot. I mean, it is to try to remember, oh, the routine here is different than the routine there, even though you're so used to the routine there and you're trying to maybe unintentionally use that same routine. Yeah, I get it. I get it.
And that's why I love that we're playing Star Wars, because it just like allows me to be like, yep, all the fantasy tropes are over there. You know, give me them sci-fi tropes. Yeah. I don't have to juggle it all.
Which is also weird because I'm definitively currently running Star Wars in a very fantasy fashion.
Yeah, but I mean, I think
it's so funny though, like to know that about like, you know, where you're at expectation wise and everything. And then for me to go, oh shit, I'm literally doing exactly the opposite of what he probably wants.
I'm not a paladin there. I'm a Jedi. And those very subtle tropes for me allow me to play a character that is different. I'm not thinking about a knight that is a part of an order that is beholden to a regent or something like that. I am part of a like monk-like, you know, like there's enough subtlety that regardless of what the, you know, system or what the kind of narrative is, I change the trope in my head so that the narrative for me can be in that space. My head goes to that space, and I you know, you could be running Goldilocks and the Three Bears, but I know that I'm a Jedi and I'm not, you know, the huntsman, and I'm not the, you know, just little things that allow me to enjoy it more.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Like when I created Renaissance City, I intentionally wanted it to be, even though it's in the 1920s in Detroit, it's still you know what I mean? I wanted it to be an allegory for, you know, current times. And so there's a lot of modern things that are part of it. You know, I have androids and I have, excuse me, you know, and one of the original characters really wanted to go with this magic and demons and all of that stuff. And I'm being honest, Clint, I love you and I miss you, but I didn't want to play a fantasy game, right? I didn't want to tell a fantasy story. I wanted to tell a superhero story, which is different, right? A comic book, you know, I mean, that's traditional, you know, heroes fighting villains in a city is different than the fantasy, you know, swords and sorcery and all of that sort of stuff. 4 or 5 years later, I'm dying to tell a fantasy story again. I spend the majority of my time, if I'm writing, I spend the majority of my time writing fantasy stuff because that's where, you know, my heart is. But yeah, I made that decision intentional when I created Renaissance City, because I wanted to stop telling fantasy stories for a little while.
Was there, so not to get too far in the weeds there, but was there a reason for that? Was there a reason like you got kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, kind of burned out on fantasy?
Because in 2017, maybe early 2018, I found PBTA for the first time. And I didn't get the chance to play it until I played Cult, Divinity Lost. But I had read Urban Shadows, and I had read what's the original game? Apocalypse. And I hadn't played any of those games, but and then what was the system? Monster of the Week, when the McElroys did that amnesty trope, you know, that amnesty line. That was, you know, I was like, oh, okay, you know, and I started to kind of go, oh, I want to tell these stories. Oh. And I wanted to get back to Face Rip, but I couldn't find a good working, easy model to be like, here is how you play Face Rip. Here, you know what I mean? Because I'm playing.
So for people that don't know, so for people who don't know what Phasor Rip or Face Rip is, can you tell them Because
So
if I tell them, it'll be forever.
Shortly, it's the original Marvel superheroes game from I think it was written in the mid 80s originally. And it's one of the first games that Ben and I played together. And it's literally based in the Marvel universe of the mid to late 80s. But you build superheroes and you play superhero stories, right? You play comic book stories.
It's extremely 80s Marvel.
It is, well, yes, it is 80s Marvel. If you're not familiar with that, I highly recommend going back and reading through some of the Thor, the X-Men stories, during the 80s. Spider-Man, I've tried to go back and read some of that. It just never sparkled in my brain. Incredible Hulk. I loved Incredible Hulk in the 80s. Oh my God.
That's such a thing too. I'm just to point out how many of us from that time period who like hung out and everything together, regardless of all other facts, I can't think of a kid we grew up with, whether they were an out and out nerd or whether they weren't, who didn't love Incredible Hulk.
It was so good. It's still so good. Yeah, agreed. Anyway,
the Peter David run.
Peter David eventually, but even pre-Peter David.
Yeah.
It just that it was like there's just so much to it. There was so much just great stuff involved in it. I don't know why all of a sudden my voice went like this, but it did.
So that's where it kind of sparked, and I was like, oh, right. I don't have to just tell sword and sorcery stories.
Yeah.
Right. I can. There are these other systems. Apocalypse World. That's the name of the fucking game. Jesus Christ.
PBTA, baby.
Yes. So I was like, oh yeah, right. I love sci-fi. Why can't I tell a sci-fi story? I love horror. Why can't I tell a horror story? And so I moved away from D&D not completely, but for the most part, and especially streaming. Desert City is the first D&D game that I've actually, been part of producing content for. Everything prior to that was something outside of D&D. And so that's kind of when it started and how it started. And now I'm ready to go back and start telling some fantasy stories again. I have that itch, because I haven't led a big epic, high fantasy story in so many years. And that's what I did for the majority of my life as a DM, was telling these epic high fantasy stories.
Yeah, Tales of High Adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's something that can't be understated, that you can get burnout in a lot of different ways. And I mean, it can be as simple as like, I'm just burned out, or it can be as complex as like, I just don't have a fantasy story to tell anymore. Like there's nothing I have nothing left in the tank, John. You have to put on your salmon suit and then move forward. And that's so fucking hard.
It can be.
Sorry, that was a big wrestling reference there I just went into, but
you're good.
I got plenty left in the tank, John. But I mean, I think we do run into that where it's like, okay, well, what are we doing? Like, what story am I telling? Or do I even have something to say that's worthwhile? I run into that a lot where it's like, okay, what am I trying to do here?
Mm-hmm.
What story do I want to, am I trying to tell? Or do I even have something? Or am I just like in a perpetual state of just babble?
One of the things that I have done that has been fun for me, and I think fun for the players, is I will straight up tell them, listen, we're going to roll D6, and whoever gets the highest number, they're going to tell us where we start.
Oh, that's a cool one. I like that.
You tell us where we are and where we start and what the situation is, and then we will go from there. and then the next, you know what I mean, after we wrap up that scene, or after we wrap up that little, you know, that short arc, I give it to the person who rolled the next highest number, and I'm like, okay, where are we? What are we doing? And why are we here? And then we roll from there. And it's been that's been a savior for me in multiple instances of my own burnout or lack of planning, you know, when I haven't had the time to plan. Or burnout, I guess. I'm ready for someone else to, you know, put their foot on the gas for a little bit.
Jesus, take the wheel.
Right.
Sometimes Jesus take the wheel is like, Jesus, take the fucking wheel. You know, you're begging someone to like to get in on it, you know, and
to be the paterfamilias.
Yeah, it's something. I wish that it was more of an understood kind of thing where you're trying to get people to get more involved in that and kind of help out. Because I mean, I will say this all the time, and I don't mean it to be a dick, but sometimes I've said it flatly. I'm not here to entertain you. I am not your TV substitute. Because sometimes it feels like people want you to be their TV substitute. And I don't like that feeling. And it's one thing when it's people who are watching. It's quite another when it's your friends who are playing. And there's this attitude of like, you know, well, you're running. Well, yeah. Because no one else will.
Yeah.
No one else will take that on. And I find that to be kind of exhausting. And I know we talk about it all the time. And I don't want anyone ever to feel like, well, fucking Ben really hates me because he talks about this a lot. But
your feelings are valid. Your feelings are valid.
It's more just a sense of just kind of exhaustion at the fact that, you know, it can be something where we are trying a lot to I don't know, help me out here, James. I feel like I'm drowning.
You're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. That's part of it too.
Yeah, I mean, we really want to have our friends have all the opportunity in the world to have fun. You know, life's hard, and it's only going to get harder for a while. So being able to give folks options and give folks space to be able to tell tales and, you know, be involved in that high adventure is important, I think. But it's
yeah.
I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Impulse too, you know. I mean, I want to tell stories and I want to hang out with my friends, and you know, to a certain extent, this is what we have. You know, I mean, especially during the pandemic, this is all we had. You know, and I, you know, you are immunocompromised. My mom is immunocompromised. I have 2 nephews that were tiny, you know, during the pandemic. And so, you know, I mean, what we had is what we had. And you know, that space, I think, especially during that period, but, you know, certainly again, right, I think that there is, when the narrative of reality is not one that we can accept, I think that the opportunity to craft our own narratives and our own realities is the escape that we need as well. And I think that to have that be, you know, something that we are all equitably contributing to, and doing so with the appreciation of, you know, one another's talents and commitments, I think is, you know, is what makes a good group to begin with. But I think certainly so when, you know, when the onus of, you know, expectation, you know, in a classical, you know, RPG sense, you know, falls on, you know, an individual. And I think that's, you know, it's the role we play. You know, I would say partially because I feel more at home, being able to dream those things up maybe than just like coming in with no control. You know, I'm not saying that it has to, like I said, bend to my will. I'm more than willing to go on the wild ride if Mr. Toad decides to blow up the rails. But you know, I like to be able to at least know what kind of environment those new rails are running in, and you know, making sure that that's something that I think will both be fun for my friends and also for myself, and that it's a safe space too. You know, that it's not something that's exploitative or putting people in uncomfortable positions, because you know, I think that we've all been a game like that where you're like, oh, this isn't, you know, I mean, like Duke said, like once you kill that NPC, that's not the same game anymore.
Right.
That's not the same party anymore. That's not the same anything anymore. Like that wasn't, you know, I mean, I think it's being more conscious of the kind of social contract of playing together and what expectations are. You know, sometimes you head off those things in the past, and sometimes people just go rogue, you know, and you're like, oh, I didn't, you know, if I knew it was gonna be that kind of party, you know,
I'll stick my dick in the mashed potatoes.
Right.
yeah, you know, we do it. We don't do that anymore, you know. Or if we do, we, you know, hopefully give people a little bit of a heads up so that it's not, you know, so jarring or, you know, or triggering or anything that would cause them to have a, you know, a bad experience, more so just an unexpected experience, you know. And I think that those are very different things to some people, and the exact same thing to some people, depending on perspective. And I think that that's yeah, I think that that's something I think about sometimes as well. But that, you know, has a lot to do with who's playing and how we frame the game ahead of time. And, you know, I don't think I've really had any real problems with that, at least recently. So,
Yeah, me either. And I listen to Sly Flourish.
Hell yeah.
I'm a big fan of his, and you know, he's just starting a new campaign with one of his groups, and he talks about the episode, and I kind of do it a little bit, but you know, he puts forth, you know, beforehand, it was a great point of advice. He was like, you are part of this group, and your goal as this group is to take down, you know, or disrupt the power and the supply chains of the Dragon Lords. Like that's who this group is, and giving them at least that, while still allowing sandbox, you know, it's saying, hey, I want you to be heroes. I want you to be working for the good of the, you know, of this, and you are fighting. This is the power that you are fighting. Do you always have to be, you know, intercepting, you know, the trains of gold? Do you always have to be, you know, no, you don't. But the overarching of this entire campaign is that your goal is to get to point X. So I liked that piece of advice, because I haven't, that's not something that I tend to be part of, but especially now that I'm streaming, that advice makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. Also, it's an explanation of expectation.
Right.
You know, what are we doing? Like, what exactly are we doing?
Right. Well, I mean, if you're playing Lasers and Feelings, that's, you know, you shouldn't come into it with any of that, right? My one standard for Lasers and Feelings is that all of the NPCs on the ship are all red shirts, and they all have a name that is some form of red, whether it's Scarlet or Vermilion, or, you know what I mean? Like, that's their names. You know, that's what I walk into Lasers and Feelings with. That's it.
Really? I really like that idea. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way.
But if it's right, but if it's a long-term campaign, something I'm, you know, I build out 24 NPCs, you know, so that I have something to draw from, and who they're connected to and how, you know, I mean, like I'm very structured in that side of things, just so that it's easier for me when my players go off the rails. I can be like, oh, well, General Grievous over here, he flies in, and he's causing this chaos over here. If you want to go check out that chaos, and if they don't take the bait, then, you know.
So, query. weird question. I don't know what I was trying to say there for a second. Is that the inevitability of the games we play and run, that it's going to go off the rails regardless of everything?
Yes, every game I've ever been in, every game I've ever run.
That it is just an inevitability, and we should be prepared for that inevitability.
I think that to a certain extent, yes. But I think it's one of the things that was really great about Extra Life this year, and we talked about this a little bit on the Wrap Show, is like we very intentionally ran all rules light or one page. Like there was very little traditional, kind of RPG, and to a certain extent, it kind of does away with the kind of formality and expectation, like Duke was saying. Like you don't know what uncanny dodge is, and it's like, no, mother. I don't read this 100-page book anymore because I got 18 million other things vying for my attention, And so, to a certain extent, it like takes the onus off and like also allows people to just like think up stuff that I would never think up. And I think that when some of that expectation is taken away of like the hierarchy of all of the kind of rule set, I mean, this coming from being like war gaming and like very prescribed, I think that, you get to the like favorite idiom that Ben has ever said that clicked with me very early on is like you just gotta get people to drive it like they stole it. Like if they're not worried about the consequence as much, then they will make more interesting actions. They will run off with the second dishwasher. They will propose marriage to Dunderfoot Churro Snap. They will do.
I want to know everything there is to know about Dunder.
That's the next prep school.
Yeah,
that's the next prep school.
And I think that that's, to me, part of the joy of taking that expectation of like the fact that there even are rails. I think that's one of those like Sly Flourish things, right? The lazy prep guide and all of those things that get me to kind of unclench about like where this thing should be going, or even like what the options are. And that's tough too, because you really have to then improv, almost everything. But it's also one of the reasons why I made the notion and have all of the like different places that came out of the microscope and every bar and every this and every, person that they mentioned, just because then when they say I'm going to go do this weird thing on this weird thing, I can be like, okay, well, I can go to, much like, you're talking about Duke asking for lore, I can go to and be like, oh yeah, the 2 sentences that they said about this said like, this is important and it's in this location and this is the person that runs it. And it's like, okay, well, tell me what you're going to do when you connect with, George Clooney.
Churro Snap Dunderfoot.
Yeah, exactly. Like why is he important to you making this decision, or why is that kind of the path that you're going, and what is your character thinking about in kind of making this next step, and that's been really helpful to me. I don't use the prep sheets as much, but just having this kind of like world encyclopedia like takes a little bit off of my like anxiety of being to a certain extent in the driver's seat, even though it's autonomously running based on all of our directions.
Yeah, well, and you never know what your players are gonna glom onto either. So in Renaissance City, I use that as an example because it's just there. We have a character who is from a different dimension, and he landed on Earth 7 years ago, and he's not from here, and his planet is essentially like this massive Hatfield McCoy, right? It's his people versus the other people, and it's just all violence all the time. And he gets here and he meets this guy in Italy on the shores of the Mediterranean, and this guy's trying to teach him how to be human. And one of the things that he gloms onto is that gentlemen wear hats because it's the 1920s. And so it became this whole thing in the game because he brought it up, as his character. And literally one of the best scenes in the entire series that we run is this improv where they're trying to get into one of the villains' homes, and they set up an appointment as haberdashers, and he goes in and he tries to sell him on all of these new hat styles, and it's brilliant. It's beautiful. I mean, it's one of my favorite scenes that I've ever been a part of ever. And it started because gentlemen wear hats. And the alien decided that that's one of the key things in being a human during this period of time. You know, I mean, so those are the kinds of things that I love about games and player agency, and that I am happy to run with. Happy to run with especially when everybody gets on board. And that's the other part of being a GM is what's everybody on, you know what I mean? What's everybody in the group glomming onto? What are the 2 or 3 things that you can get them all to agree on that are fun and funny, or, you know, linchpins in their ideals for their characters, and just grabbing those and running with them.
Yeah.
Well, so, you know, I know we talk about this a lot, and we're heading into a post Extra Life now, because Extra Life's done for this year, which cool. What's the plan? God, don't say that, James. Sometimes I need for it to be over for a little while.
I think I'd like to figure out how I run that, like, time quangle like they're doing in D20. I thought it was, I'll be honest with you, I thought it was an unmitigated disaster. I had a rare and onerous Benjamin Mayer moment.
Oh, don't even compare your bullshit to my goddamn
No. I'm not talking about the
horrifying nature of Puzzle
Dungeon.
Dungeon.
I'm not talking about the Puzzle Dungeon.
What year was that? What year was that?
It was the very first year, dude. It was 10 years ago, my man.
Oh,
it was 10 years ago.
Get over it. It's 10 years ago.
I will never get over that.
And the funny thing is, dude, that's not what I was going to mention. I was going to mention Ben's unfailing attitude when we used to play in person and going, oh God, you know, maybe B minus. I just don't, you know, we're all like, you know, we're like sitting there going, oh fuck, and Ben's like over there, and, you know, Charlie Browning to himself, while like everybody else is like, fucking, I can't wait for the next session. And I was like, I was in Bensville, population me, you know. Yep. I you know, na 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 na. That was me after that session, and everybody was like, oh no, I really like the idea of that. And I was totally like upset, and like I didn't know what was going on when we went back to the Thunderlock bar crawl, and then I was doing this, and then we had to, you know, they like rolled to like, essentially they each came in with characters they'd played at Extra Life before. They weren't able to change them at all. They had to be, you know, from a certain level to a certain level, and they like rolled, and it's based on this Dimension 20 thing, but it's essentially like the Exiles comic, you know, which I love, you know, I mean, anything like that. And they ended up like, they liked it, and I still like, I need to debrief with them more about, you know, like what and why and how, because I'm still like a little bit Charlie Browning about it. Like, oh, I wish I would have had more time to prep or this or that. But you know, I love the idea of being able to revisit some of these Drive It Like You Stole It and still be in that place without it being Extra Life. I mean, I think it's what can sometimes weigh down our ongoing games is they get too heavy, or they get too, you know, lore based, or, you know, people don't feel like they can kind of hop in. I think it's what, you know, I really appreciate about Ben running like Chaos Scar is that there's, you know, there's variety in the conceit. And I think that sometimes, you know, that's what's hard about anything, you know, getting involved in a show or getting involved in a comic or something, and you're like, okay, or Star Wars, you know, it's like, oh, but there's like, you know, 40 years of this, and it's like, well, you don't have to watch everything, you know, like you can just start watching Rebels and you're not going to get everything, but like you could just be so into the fact that there's this little made family, the same way that the person who sat down and watched Star Wars, you know, originally was just like, oh, this is amazing. It's all these people that found each other, and they, you know, they got together, and they overcame this huge adversity and this, you know, this tyranny and blah, you know, I mean, I'm guessing that, when my nephew started watching, Rebels or Clone Wars or other people's, younger siblings or nieces or nephews started watching, the cartoons, they may not have never necessarily watched everything that came before it. But, well, I mean, if they were ours, yes, they were forced to sit through everything. But yeah, but somebody's on Disney XD and Rebels comes on and they just keep watching because it's the thing that was on after their favorite show, and they go, "What is this Star Wars?"
Right.
There's a reason why some people will swear up and down for their their generation of whatever IP it is, right? Is because that's theirs.
Well, I mean, think about the Marvel, think about the MCU, right? Yeah. Every time I watch an MCU movie with someone, because they know that I'm a comic book kid, they're like, "Oh, what's going to happen next?" I'm like, "I don't have a fucking clue. I don't have a clue." I know some of the lore of Captain America. I know some of the lore of Iron Man. I know, but I haven't read every single story that Iron Man has been in. I haven't read every single story that the Scarlet Witch has been in. I haven't, and in the beginning, I had to remind myself that this is what comics do. They retell stories. There are new versions of old tropes. There's mixing of all of that stuff. Because in the beginning, I was like, "Fuck this! This is awful. Why didn't they tell that story?" And then I was like, "Oh, right. But this is comics. That's what they do. They take the characters and they just retell stories with those same characters, or they make up new stories and they retcon out this part of that story." It's like people, with Robert Downey Jr., being announced as Dr. Doom. Well, and I'm like, it's comics. It's comics. You don't have to love everything. You don't have to know every bit of lore, and they don't have to adhere to shit. They don't have to adhere to anything. They're telling new stories, and I'm glad that there's new stories being told.
Last night, my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law were trying to leave. And my brother-in-law and I got on. This is cool brother-in-law, not bad brother-in-law. We're talking about comic books. And it started with me showing him, I just finished reading Peacemaker Tries Hard that Matt had lent me. And I was like, "You haven't watched Peacemaker yet?" He was like, "No, I didn't watch the second Suicide Squad movie," and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, "You do know that this is like the most ridiculous, funny shit. It's literally a show about a guy who's really bad at being anything, but who thinks he's just killing it."
Yeah.
It's hilarious, like that you have this ostensibly a superhero who's terrible at being a superhero, and his mission statement is pretty much awful.
Yeah.
But
I mean, he's an unmitigated disaster.
But he's like there's something like pure about his ideal of wanting this.
True. He has you're right. He has the confidence of Donald Trump.
Yes.
And he's also Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the competence as well.
Right.
But there's something, endearing about this character who's just a dumb lout. And that, and then you learn about his life and you go, okay, I can see why and how this guy is the way he is. And goddamn, that's depressing.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting into that, then somehow that turned into talking about Infinity Gauntlet and Infinity War and all that stuff, and trying to explain in a relatively controlled fashion all that stuff, and him going, "I had no idea," and I was like, yeah, this is why being in that mode I can get into of this is why this is fucking awesome. This is why you should be reading these things or looking at these things or whatever it is. And for an hour and a half until my sister-in-law was like, "We are leaving." You
were
can
leaving
either-
90 minutes ago.
You can either get in the car and leave with me, or you can just live here for a while. And he was like, I gotta go. That's fine. But I think that's, in a way, I kind of feel like that's what we do when we play games, is we're doing something similar. Because you were talking like Fazarip, I would want to play in a Fazarip game, because I have a soft spot in my heart for that system since, we played it as kids. And it's a good system. But also because, like, who doesn't want to tell, like, Days of Future Past, or
Right.
what is it? What is that one with the Sentinels in the cuff? It's like, Operation Wide Awake.
Wide Awake, yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of, like, doing that. But at the same time, it's like being able to find someone who wants to run it and do the prep on it and do all those things. It's not easy to find someone who wants to do that. So yeah, I mean, I just think that's always an interesting kind of, when you're playing, like, I was so desperate for them to put out that goddamn Masters of the Multiverse game that they showed off.
Have you played it?
It doesn't exist because they were ready to do it, and then they let the license lapse so they could continue to work on the Dragon Prince game, because the Dragon Prince, the Dragon Prince game was doing so well, which I don't begrudge them for. I mean, if it's going well and making money, you got to do your thing. But for me, as a Motu fan, I was just pissed about it, because it's you had the game I wanted. So I think that's a thing. I think we all want the game that's going to appeal to us, not just from a fantasy or sci-fi perspective or any of that stuff, but from the very perspective of like this is the license I love.
Right. Well, I started a storyline. It's been a couple years ago. I pinged you about it at one point. I wanted to take New Gods, the Jack Kirby, right? I wanted to take that, and I wanted to use that setting, but have a second set of kids that are playing within that universe, outside of the main storyline, while still having the main storyline out there to pull from.
Yep.
But I started,
which is brilliant.
I started getting into the prep for that, and I was like, oh my God, it's gonna take me 6 months to write this. Because there's so much, and I would have to teach so many people so many things about the world itself, and that storyline, and who all of the characters that are involved, and it was but that's, I mean, it's still a goal of mine, but it's that side of GMing and is
because there's this whole thing that I think sometimes people forget about, is like, you're not just running the game, but in some ways you're teaching. And you have to teach people how to play the game. You have to teach people how, like, the part of the world building that you're doing. And that sometimes is really difficult, because some people are just like, hey man, I love all that, but I just want to roll dice and kill stuff.
Right.
And I don't like to cut those folks out. But at the same time, it's like, a lot of times I don't want to run that game. That's not the game I'm as interested in. I'm not as interested in just running the Murder Hobo game. So I think it's hard. I really do. I think finding your folks and finding your story and finding finding the collaborative partners you're looking for is not always an easy thing to do. But when you do get magic. You get like something really neat. There's a weird alchemy that goes into that, and I've played some weird stuff in the last couple of years, like James was talking about Chaos Guard. I've had, two reasonably well-known professional wrestlers playing in a game where one of them is playing John Cenagar, the barbarian who thinks he's a thief because no one can see him. which is
no
not
one can see him.
which is not even remotely true. He's a giant dude, but also him going, "Hey, that boulet, that juvenile boulet, yeah, can I can I give it a suplex? Yeah, you can try. Well, I'm going to do it, but also that guy being someone who I know James and I both really adore as a person because he's been real good to us, but him wanting to play, not because he never played D&D before, but wanting to play because he's like, I am the forever DM where I live, and it fucking sucks.
Honestly, though, while there is burnout, I'm now that I've been playing, I miss being in the DM chair. I do.
Do you think it's a matter of control? Like I was going to ask James.
Yeah, I think a little bit of it is
as well.
Yeah.
James, which do you prefer, honestly? If you had your druthers and didn't have to worry about it, or didn't have to worry about being stuck in one role or the other, which do you think you would prefer to be, the DM or the player?
Oh man, depends on the DM of the game I'm playing in.
That's also true. That's a great point.
I think that.
Okay, well, no. That's a good question. Like, so you get to choose the DM, and you get to choose the players, and you get to choose the length of the campaign, all that jazz. You get to control. This is your fantasy come true.
Fantasy Island.
The plane.
Yeah, I think about that sometimes, and like, do I have the sauce for the game that I want to be running with the game I'm running? And I think honestly, it has more to do with where I'm at in life and where like life is in general, like the current everything, like I am stressed out, and I think that makes for bad creative juices. And my wife and I talked about this a bit, when she was working in a creative field, and she loves to sew and knit, and she's a wonderful artist, cartoonist, and she said, like, I don't have anything left at the end of the day.
I really wish we could get her to play games.
I think that we could once she gets through her program, but I think it's just been, been a big
because
deal.
I think she would be a hoot.
I think she'd be fantastic, yeah,
and would find some creative solace in that, like being able to get in and like just tell stories.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
but I say that about
things
everybody.
Told. I mean, man, I would love to be able to, but again, I would also love to have the time to take all of the stuff we put into Dracewin and everything else and make something that is like this. I more than anything, I would like to do something with all of our friends. All of these settings we've created, all of these stories we've told. I think about your omnibus of the known world, and pages upon pages and pages. And I think that what made the known world so good, and the reason why we still, like ape that name, even though it isn't what it, it isn't set up the way it is because there was something that was refreshing about being in a setting that was so familiar, but it wasn't somebody else's setting. I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't play D&D for a long time, or some like game franchises are really hard to get into, or any franchise, right? I think that people talk about Greyhawk, or people talk about Faerun, or they talk about this, they talk about that, and it's something that you grew up with, like it was a part of the game, was also like this amazing thing. It's for the people that like really like the lore of Magic the Gathering, but like most people don't give a shit. Most people don't care, like until they started making, cards that were dependent on, being these, planeswalkers, right? Like until that happened, like 95% of people didn't know what a planeswalker was, like.
Well, are you saying that the Jace Beleren stands that's not a real thing?
I mean, I loved it. I love slivers, and I love the idea of like planeswalking, and like I really liked the narrative of Magic. It was one of the things that like kind of kept me going back when there'd be like a new set, and I'd be like, I don't really know about spending a bunch of money on cardboard, but I'd like to know the lore, but I never had that.
I love the lore more than I love the game.
Yeah. I mean, I love the lore just in general, and so for me, I've always wanted to have the time and the bandwidth to be able to, like, it's one of the reasons why I started building out the Notion and trying to be really like extra about getting all the little details in and going back and listening to old sessions and putting stuff in, is because I like that part of it, and I think that's when the game is most fun to me, is when we're like really riffing. And so to a certain extent, I mean, we've talked about this before, like what James should really do is James should just run Microscope the way Microscope was intended, where you have these little vignettes of role playing, but it changes all the time. That it's about answering a specific question and people opting into roles, and you play until the person who is identified the lens, like the question that they have asked to solve in the scene,
is gone. He got so
has
into
disappeared.
he was like, I really want to answer this question, and then he was like, but not with you,
but to somebody else.
Yep. That's weird. He barely ever has issues where he pops out like that. Do you run into that at all, where you're like, I'm more interested actually in my own lore than I am in running the game? Because the game is all right, but the lore, like, I feel like I really outdid myself here, and I really want to bask in my own glory here.
So it's not so much basking in my own glory. It's I have a world, and really just like one continent that I've really focused on for 15 years, probably at this point. And I have so much of it. Hi, hello, welcome back.
Firefox went, fuck you.
Were you talking about something you love? Guess what? You're not talking about it anymore.
Yeah, that's okay.
No, we were.
Do you want to finish your point?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think the big part of it was just I like having something that's made by us, and I like having that to be able to reference that we made it. And so there's something really enticing when you do bring something back, like it's not just a couple pages of lore or a 15-page backstory. It's hundreds of years of lore that has been created collectively and been built on by each other, intentionally in the way that the game works. But I've really thought about, just between now and Extra Life next year, playing Microscope and just playing it the way that it's intended, and doing some of the role playing, as well as the kind of structured pieces, so that then like we go, oh well, yeah, I'd love to play something with some of those characters that we have from a certain period in time, and maybe just like picking some of those favorite things out and like using the lore to set up the thing. Because I think that what was so amazing about the first couple Extra Lives is there was some deep fucking cuts from known world lore from Ben, and that was fun. I mean, if I could play in virtually any setting I've played, it was some of those like lore rich things that we did, because I felt like I was stepping into a place that like I was welcome in, but it was also like kind of a bit of an exclusive club. It was something that only we knew the consequence of, and so we were exploring that together in this space with people that similarly, it was kind of like the opposite of hiding, your kind of nerddom. It was like, oh, this is like an exclusive nerddom. This is our, this is like our special sauce. It's like,
you're the hipster nerd.
Yeah. You're barbecue. Like
right.
you're what went in the smoker. And when it comes out, everything it's gone through, and you're just like, oh, yeah. Everybody's like, oh, I can't wait to put some sauce on it, and I'm like, no.
That's my only thing about that is always the idea with something like that is so
exclusive.
Yeah, or inside baseball type of thing, is that it's not accessible And I think, when we did that, it was very hard to try and do something that was both accessible, but also was like us being high on our own bullshit. And I feel like it was okay the first couple of years. And then after that, I found it harder and harder and harder to be able to pull that off effectively. But yeah, I mean,
but is that also you giving yourself a B- grade while all of your players around you are fucking cheering you on and throwing you 100%?
But that's the thing. I don't know. Like, I honestly, I don't know. I don't know if it's the fact that I can't look at it objectively, or if it's the fact
at all. Ben does not go back and watch things.
See, so the problem with that,
I obsess about it. I obsessively go back and watch. Part
of it is because I'm the editor. Aggravated.
I think part of it is because I'm the editor that I have to listen 37 times to something to make sure that I'm getting the beats and that and that my cuts are right and that my pauses are long enough or I'm shortening pause. You know what I mean? I'm cutting the ums. You
learn to get over yourself because you realize just how imperfect it is.
So quickly. Dude, it used to take me 20 hours to cut an hour or hour and a half episode. Like, because I was so terrible at it, I had no idea what I was doing in the program. And on top of it, I didn't know how to cut sound. You know what I mean? Like from an artistic side of things.
I can't hear it.
And that's okay. There are lots and lots of people that are that way. I know, you know what I mean? Again, I've been an actor for years. I've been a performer since I was a kid. Literally my first show was when my mom was Guinevere in Camelot when I was like 6 or 7.
Do you remember who was King Arthur in that?
Yeah, of course. You're Sam. Yeah. Yep. I have that.
Do you have the poster of that?
Wait. Who is your Sam? Because all I picture is there's a Samwise Gamgee out there that Ben has never told me about to his Frodo.
Has never acknowledged.
Sam was our Gandalf in a lot of ways.
He was something.
He was something. Yeah.
It's my Uncle Sam, who turned out to be a real weird dude upon death, and finding out a lot of stuff about him. Just going like, the fact that he had like multiple warehouses full of stuff and had a wife before my Aunt Susan, who died under mysterious causes, and just he would have been a perfect, like, this week on to catch a killer type of thing. You're going like, fair. Okay. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's the guy. I know you've seen this picture, James, the Sesame Street lynching picture that I have.
Oh God, yeah.
Where there's a man trying to hang me with all the other Sesame Street people that are hung. That was my Uncle Sam. He was a character.
Gotcha.
But he was also a very good actor, and he was the head of community theater. And he did a lot of neat stuff. So as much as sometimes I'm like, hey, maybe wasn't the best dude.
Right.
He
very talented and mentored a lot of people and did a lot of good for the community theater in the small town that we grew up in. Anyway, my point is his wife, go ahead. No, she's amazing.
I was just gonna say
your Aunt Susan.
Yeah, Susan's kind of is to me like the person to point at because she's just amazing.
She is the most influential person in my creative life. Absolutely.
I think for a lot of people, myself included, just like someone who never ever said no.
Right.
Like it was like if you wanted to do something or you wanted to try something, or regardless of like what it was artistically, she would always be like, yeah, you should go for that. You should not say no to that. You should go for it.
But I know hundreds of people who never want to see themselves ever. And I even have that. My mom had tapes of stuff that we were in, and I can't sit down with other people and watch myself, you know what I mean, on stage or in a show. I can't. But with this audio,
that's so wild.
I have gotten over that, and I listen, you know what I mean? I make sure that I listen dozens and dozens of times. So it's kind of broken me of that. But I know that feeling 100%, Ben.
But that's so wild to me, though. To be honest,
break out
is
the
because
tape, and I'm like, nope, we're not doing that. We're not
it's
breaking.
because you've always been so good at like just being a creative and being able to perform and being able to like just do all that. I cannot think of a time when you weren't good at that. It's kind of like when I think of Neil, it's the same thing. Where like I've always thought of both of you as people who that was not like a facet of personality. That's just who you are. It's not something you like get to turn off. It's just like, oh, I'm just this person. This is what I do. I'm extremely talented. It's natural, and I work at it because I see that there's people out there who are even better at it than I am. But I am just superb at it.
I can stand, and I have been on stage in front of hundreds or thousands of people, and I don't get nervous. If my family wants me to stand at the piano and sing Christmas carols to them,
God, yeah.
I sweat. My entire body breaks out. You know what I mean? Like I get soaked from head to toe in sweat immediately, and can't, you know what I mean? And have to force myself to do it.
But also, you were talking about your mom. Like your mom was always an amazing performer.
Yeah.
Was just able to just do it.
Yes,
you know?
I'm blessed with her gifts. Anyway, that's so I understand your side of those things.
So like
the reason, oh, go ahead.
I think about it too, like even doing wrestling commentary, like I could not go back, even though there's times where I'm like, oh my God, that was amazing. Like we just called, a fucking, I'm trying to think of somebody whose matches we called for my love. Sting, or fucking NWO
Ultimo
shit.
Dragon.
Didn't you call a Seth Rollins match at one point?
I don't think we've ever called Seth Rollins, which I don't like Seth Rollins, so because I think he's a douche.
Kevin Nash and Scott Hall.
Ultimo Dragon.
The Ultimo Dragon, yeah.
We were supposed to call a Great Muta match, which I would have lost my fucking mind over, but COVID happened, and my best friend Sonny Ono, it sounds like, may have been like, hey, we need more money, and the promoter was like, hey, guess what? That's not going to happen. But anyway, like there are things like that where I just can't listen to it. I just can't.
And that's okay.
Which is mad because I think I would be better at it if I could just sit down and like digest it. But like especially game stuff, I just can't. God.
I think that one of the things that's like really interesting is we're both essentially in people service industries, right? You're in social service, I'm in design service, but in the end, we're both serving people. But I think that the best thing that someone ever said to me is you are a landscape architect, right? The day that person walks into your office for the first time might be the hardest day of their life. And like through continued service and support, they will grow into, the landscape that you perceive 10 years from now, right? We don't plant, trees that are 5 feet around, right? We don't have the shade that we need. We don't have the windbreak that we need. We don't have the, ecology of the natural grasses or the rainwater or stormwater mitigation we have. Like for landscape architecture, I think for social services, it is a long game in a way that you have to keep like trying new things and, like going back and forth and like, maybe it has to go here or then they come back and you do something here. For architecture, the best day our buildings will ever have is the day that we cut the ribbon. From there, it's all downhill, right? It's all maintenance and material breakdown and everything like that, because all of that like has to happen on the front end. All that failure to get it to the point where it can be built, happens in that time. And I think that it happens, we both build up this like professional like backlog of information, and like how to address a client that comes through your door based on all of the cumulative experience. Like John Dewey, who's like one of my favorite writers and pragmatists, says that experience is double-barreled. It's both the thing that you you have and the thing you experience, you know. And I think that I think about that a lot when I'm trying to tell people like not to be hard on themselves as they're like in the moment, or as they're having to like go back and like, you know, do this, like learn how to do this thing that's like very iterative and like takes, you know, failing faster and becoming less sensitive to, you know, to failures. Because, you know, the reality is like, you know, those the failures, you know, not everything's going to wait for me, you know. And I think that that's something that I had to just like divest myself from the kind of personal criticism, because otherwise I would just drown. Because the reality is like we're also all working collaboratively. There's very few, you know, buildings that get built, or, you know, anything that gets built, you know, that doesn't take a community of collaborators. So the kind of farce of learning how to fail through, you know, a process is that you'll always have people supporting you, you know, and you'll always be able to, like I was saying earlier, like, no, like, oh, I need a structural engineer here, I need a civil engineer here, I need a hydrologist, or I need a, you know, electrical engineer or something. But, you know, sometimes that expectation we still like put on ourselves. And I think that that's one of the reasons why kind of going back and doing like editing and stuff like that for the podcast and other things like that was just, it's not easy. But I also think that I just recognize, you know, again, like it's all downhill from there, you know, like I have to put my work in somebody else's hands to maintain, because that's not the role I play at a certain point. And I think that that's the same for gaming, you know, is like we can make these worlds, we can build all the rails, we can build the rails, you know, across the entire continent. But if, you know, somebody in the first county decides to blow them and, you know, go in a different direction, you know, we're in Montreal or Mexico, and we're not speaking the language pretty quick. So
yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. I think, yeah, I just think it's an interesting beast.
Yeah,
because it's like we're basically saying it's like you can do all this and you can create all this, but in the end, like it's hard to, like, I guess, feel like it's yours, or that it's good, or that, you know,
it's that second part for you. It's that second part, I think. I have a wealth of confidence. I have a ridiculously,
but that's part, I think,
detrimental wealth of confidence.
But I think that's something too why you have always been such a good like performer. It's because you do like have like this not only do you have it, but you exude just this like, I'm going to make this happen. Like, and I you know, I think sometimes James is really good at that as well. Just this I'm really good about being around people who can do it, not necessarily that I can do it.
You just don't believe that you can do it, or you don't trust that what you are doing is good because you have that goblin in the back of your brain.
I also think like, but don't you ever? I mean, again, I don't think you probably do, but for me, sometimes it's a matter of I look at it and it's never as good as what the idea was. Like the purest form of it, that idea, that nugget of like what popped into my head at, you know, 12:30 at night, that was like, oh, you should do this thing, like this has got legs. What I actually end up doing is never that. It's never as, you know, it's just not as good. It's just not as pure as that. And I think that's like, I'm forever chasing that particular dragon to failure.
Well, that brings us all the way back to the beginning. Who are you as a DM? Right? Are you the one that, you know, does that come out of how we grew up and how the game was played when we were young, and those ideas that we hold on to about what these games are, compared to the multifaceted version of what TTRPG is now in 2024? Because it's not the same game as it was when we were growing up, when we started playing in 1985 or 86 or whatever it was.
Don't remind me.
I mean, I tell the story all the time, man. I talk about sitting on your bedroom floor with comics spread out all around us and yellow legal notepads, scribbling in pencil, our ideas for the wrestling game.
Furiously.
Yeah.
James, did you know about the wrestling game?
Anyway,
No.
that's for another.
Yeah.
That's another.
For another prep school. Yeah, I actually have to run. I'm
Yeah.
so thankful that I got to do this morning.
Anytime, man. It's always
Yeah,
super fun to talk, and we don't get a chance to do it as enough, just because, like I said, we live far away from each other. But it has been one of the great joys to have done the TTRPG theater stuff with you, but also just like having you like with us for Extra Life and like everything you bring to that, and just it's awesome, man. It's one of my
I'm grateful to be in the circle. I'm so happy to have like-minded people around me and people that enjoy doing this kind of stuff together. So
it's just a great joy. It's like it's so cool to be like, oh, time passes and distance happens, but sometimes things come back around. So
yeah. Well, wish your wife a happy birthday, and Beard, it's great to see you.
Yeah,
and
man.
Hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I got to run. Take
all
care.
right, bye, Duke.
Bye, Duke.
Tell Summer I said hi. Beard.
Hey.
So much. So we talked about so much stuff today.
It was great. It was super fun.
We were so much boys.
I know we were. I totally want to like rap with you about these guys. And I honestly, I think about that Monday. And I know I've been talking about either, streaming Time Quangle or something like that, but I also like really would like to almost do Chaos Scar, but as Microscope. Like it's just, we build a setting for a year, whoever wants to contribute, and we try to get through like 1 round of lenses or 2 round of lenses a night. And then like I will run something in that setting for Extra Life next year, or not, right? Like I honestly, I do think that like doing Extra Life or doing whatever fundraising we do like at our own pace when we want to do it, and then just doing video games or one shots or whatever, something easy, thinking about what we do it, or just giving up, letting go, and letting Gonzo when the time comes, or well above the time coming, I think would be great. But yeah,
I like the idea a lot of like doing some sort of one thing I love about like doing this is it feels like a lot of ways it's almost like crowdsourced creation and brainstorming with a whole bunch of people, whether they're in the room or not. And I will say, I feel like I've been really lucky for every game I've run in the last like couple of years since we start, which also blows my mind. I was thinking about that today. Like, how often have we done this very Sunday thing? There's a real feeling of like, I feel like my games have been better because of all the folks who contribute, who come on and they throw out ideas, and some of them are buck nutty, but there's something beautiful in that buck nuttiness.
Yeah.
And it makes me think, and sometimes I'll be like, I can't do that idea, but that, crazy idea that Spike or Shaggy or, Molotov or Mitch or whoever throws out, it germinates into something where I'm like, oh God, that in fact is something I can do, or, something I feel more comfortable with. So it's a prep school. I think out of everything that we do, in my opinion, has been like the best thing.
Yeah, it's very fun
because it is such a like a bizarre community brainstorming session.
Yeah,
and it makes me very, very happy. So, and it's super cool to have that, like, friends new and old, like, all get together and have discussions about like games, and have people pop in, like Christy and Hive of Bees and Shaggy, and like I said, Molotov at the beginning, and Super Spike, who's like basically our member, or our secret secret member of the club who's just always there, always bringing that heat.
Yeah,
So,
all of our Bombus folk.
Yeah, all
Shaggy
the bomb
and Spike and Mitch and it's
it's a big deal. I hope people realize like how much when a game is played on a Monday night or when a game is played at a kitchen table that isn't streamed. But we talked about it here, how much that like their presence can be legitimately felt in that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think maybe even like you said, doing something with everybody, I think might be a really cool thing to do. I think one of the things I would recommend is if you're going to do that, just find a way for us all to pay Joel.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the things that is a struggle sometimes when we're doing like a ground up build is having a hard time visualizing what's what. Like sometimes my brain just can't. It literally just can't do it.
Yeah.
So I think having the ability to have an artist do a rendition of it, and also, Joel is really good at what he does, and he creates really stunning art. So I don't know. That's just me spitballing right now.
Yeah, I think it's great.
But yeah, I would be down. I hope that's kind of a unknown factor, but I would be down.
Yeah.
All
right.
Beard.
I also have to call it here.
Yeah, I do too. I'm really tired. I did not realize how tired I was.
Yeah.
But everything's kind of hit me at one time.
Well,
Beard, where can people find you, your beautiful self?
They can no longer find me on Twitter. We have divested from Twitter on all fronts, personal and podcastual. Heel Turn and Known Worlds have been archived. Everything's been downloaded. I'm on Blue Sky at Huey Beard Walks. For the time being, you can also find me on Instagram, Up Your Architecture, but I think that's going to be shifting. I'm really trying to kind of take some steps intentionally to separate out personal from professional, and also thinking about kind of what I'm posting so that I am posting, because going back, I mean, honestly, the only good thing I think that has come out of leaving Twitter is downloading my backlog and looking at how well I documented some of the most important people and places and times of my life in a really like joyful way in the pre-sale years of Twitter, and how I really, I used it far more than I used Instagram. I think it was just such a touchstone and repository for people connecting with other people around interests. Before it got toxic, I think it was, it was a very egalitarian place to meet and to share conversations. That's where you can find me. You can find me playing Star Wars on Known World United. You can, hopefully find us doing some fun stuff. I got a couple things up my sleeve for the remainder of the year. I got a couple Christmas adventures that I want to run, one shots that I'm going to try to find some time for and work together with all of our Known World folks to find a time for, and some people to play in, and hopefully raise a little more money. I think I'm about $400 away from my goal for the year, and even though we reached the team goal, I always love to try to hit that personal goal and feel dandy about that. And an extra $400 in the coffers of Gillette Children's is an extra $400 in the coffers of Gillette Children's.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Will we ever see Beard on Chaos Scar? It's something that's asked of me sometimes.
Yeah, I would love to. Mondays have just been hard. I think that I have studio all morning, and that's really, Monday is really intensive for that. And then I also teach so that's like 4 hours, and then I have like a 2-hour class in the afternoon that's really professionally driven. So I'm usually coordinating a lot on Mondays, and it's it's been a hard shake. All of our 1 credit classes have been moved to Mondays. I used to have it on Thursdays, and I really enjoyed that. It was after my games for the week, and I felt like that gave me a little like fun momentum going into the weekend with students, and that it was kind of like an end cap to the week, and it sent us off on a good note. So yeah, Mondays tend to be better on weekends. We're not trying to kind of juggle other things, but I'm very much looking forward to the holiday break. I'd like to get some gaming in during those 3 weeks and change, and hop in hopefully to a Chaos Scar in there, because I would like to dabble, and I'd love to find some time to kind of be intentional like this, because I felt like we don't have these very often when we're like 2.5 hours. We're not talking about games. We're just talking about everything, like
I
Shaggy
like
said.
when we do, though. It's a very even though I'm kind of, I probably sound it and I feel it kind of mentally just fried for some reason. Sometimes after family time, I get a little just like, oh gosh, I'm really, oh, hey man, get your damn hands off of her, man.
I mean, I think doing this every other month or once a month or every 6 weeks or something would be good. I mean, I also think that one of the things I would love to do is do a known world roundtable every other month, so we can think about I think the rap show got a little heavy this year. I think that we went into druthers, and I'm probably most guilty of that.
Okay, I'm not sure what you mean. You have to be a little more specific. I'm sorry.
Well, the rap show is a time to not to be critical. The rap show is the time to hype up all the things we liked and be able to share that. In my opinion, at the end of it, I think doing a Monday post-mortem or or us talking on prep school the next week, giving it a little chance to to settle down a little bit. I think that we're all or I was more critical than I needed to be in that space, and I don't think that was looking back.
I thought you were awesome. I guess I didn't catch the vibe, but I'm really sorry if I contributed to that.
No, I'm just saying, I think that should be celebratory, and I think that we weren't the only people running games. Other people ran games. I'd love to hear from Nathan how his games went. I'd love to hear from Christy, and I know Zach didn't run as much this year, but I would love for us to all do a watch along and do dungeon taskers, and I think it would be fun to have these moments where we actually celebrate and look at what we accomplished, because I think that like we said, the tone of shifting to some of the rules light or 1-page games, I felt the vibe was different this year, and it was fun, and I didn't feel as much expectation, even though there were as few players as there were last year. I mean, there used to be a time where we had 25 different people playing in games. We really don't have that anymore. I mean, it's really a lot more concentrated, and so if it is more concentrated, then I think it'd be fun, afterwards, maybe sometime before the end of the year to have, Christy and Zach and, Lance and Nathan or whatever on one of these, or just chat and do that. And, I think it's fun to have this kind of level of transparency, and that's really, I think, sharing things that are, really, they're real about a hobby that's also, a emotional support therapy is also all of these things. I think that the transparency is great, and even though Shaggy hated this stream, I appreciate I love hated this stream, was so non-prep school, you stayed on topic too long. JK, you guys are awesome. But yeah, again, for everybody that stops by, it's always a treat, and I think that more to come.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's good for us to have long form conversations too, and I think it's we all have things we want to get accomplished, and there's things that we want to be able to do, and there's our time is precious. I mean,
oh yeah, absolutely.
Just trying to figure that out and be honest about it is not always easy, but I do think that having these conversations and being able to talk openly about like what we want out of our time and what we're trying to get accomplished is very fun most of the time.
I think it's a hoot. Yeah, I really enjoy it.
And I very much enjoy when, having someone join us who doesn't generally get to do this, I think is also good.
That was a treat. I mean, and Duke is such a, I think just a brilliant creative that it's just great to have another perspective on everything. So
yeah, he like he said, he does not lack and has never lacked for confidence. So which is something I'm always very, very jealous of because I don't always have that ability. But yeah, I think these conversations are good, and I didn't have anything to prep for, so it made it even better. I was like, oh, I mean, I got a game tomorrow, but I mean, we prepped for that a while back.
Yeah.
So I mean, anyway, James, where do folks find your beautiful self?
I already told them.
Did you really? I missed it.
Yeah. Remember I said Blue Sky, got rid of Twitter, went back. We Minnesota goodbye through it already.
I'm sorry. I am like really struggling today. Super bad.
Take a nap. Take a nap, man.
I promised my wife we would watch some stuff today, so I don't know how much napping's going to go on.
Well, take a rest. Take an R&R on the couch and watch some fun stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, you can find me tomorrow. I will be on this very channel, and it'll be time for some Chaos Cart. I'm very excited for this session. I have two
Brian and Cassandra and Warrior.
Yeah, and whoever else. My nephew asked me this weekend if I was still doing any D&D games because he has not played in a while, and he is now
which
nephew? Oldest nephew.
Oh, okay.
19.
Nice.
And I was like, yeah, here's an invite to our Discord. If you want to play Monday, just let me know.
Cool.
He's in his freshman year of college. He's going into auto mechanic stuff, and he is like, yeah, we used to play. He and his dad used to play, and they don't play anymore, and it's been frustrating for him.
Yeah.
So, and he used to play at our house. So, now he's like, so I could like just come play, and I was like, yeah, we play online, like your favorite place in the world. So, not in person.
That's
which I'm sure then will make his sister say, well, I want to play. And I'll be honest, I love my nephew, but his sister is one of the most amazing creative people. Like she much like Duke, it's just a natural thing for her. Shit just comes to her. Yeah. And when it does, it's generally pretty amazing. So we've got Chaos Scar, and then Thursday we're going to spook troop it, and we're going to talk about the stand.
Nice.
I don't know if we're going to talk about like I don't know like in what respect we're talking about the stand, but Colin and I are both big fans of the book, and we're both big fans of the OG miniseries. That was, I think, CBS or ABC. I don't remember which one. With Gary Cole and Gary Sinise and Rob Lowe and everybody.
Gary Coleman. Oh no, Gary.
Are you going for the Gary triumvirate?
Yeah, the trifecta.
The trifecta of Gary.
Yeah.
We're gonna.
That was so dumb. Yeah,
I thought
we
it was pretty good, man.
Call it.
I thought it was good, dude. Right. So we're going to talk about that, and then we might touch upon the recent one that they did, which I watched just little bits of, but other people told me they were not satisfied with it, so I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to watch the rest of this. So that's probably what we'll do. I don't know what we got in the hopper for that coming up too. It's probably because I can't like form a coherent thought right now. But thank you for hanging out as always. Thank you for being a friend as always. Are those my specialists? Oh
Yeah,
gosh,
there-
I
well.
haven't seen the. When are they coming over? I missed
Go
them.
to see Uncle Ben. Soon?
I missed them.
Okay.
I'm gonna grill today. Fuck yeah! They know.
Well, maybe we'll swing by. I'll shoot you a message once the girls get back.
Okay. Yeah, just let me know. All right, folks. Thank you for hanging out. I appreciate you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And Monday night, it's Chaos Scar. We got some slots open. Get on the Discord if you're interested. It'll be a hoot. If you like gnomes, if you like soap making, if you like dancing the jig, and you like dark secrets, it's going to be a good one. All right. Bye.
Bing bong.
I got to actually end the stream now.